We're excited to be here on our third of what we're calling our community connections. They've been very successful. We've had a lot of community engagements from our residents, and that just makes us feel really good, like we're doing something right. So tonight we're going to talk about three items. The first item that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about growth. Growth in Marana, what's going on, how that town handles applications that we get, just some various growth items that we get. You know, I get a lot of emails. I get emails that say, hey, I just moved here. I love Marana, but there's concrete trucks driving by my house every day. When are you going to stop that? So we'll kind of talk a little bit about that. You know, another one I get is, how many car washes are we going to build? Why do you guys keep building car washes? And so we want to talk a little bit about growth and how it happens and the town's role in that. The next thing we're going to talk about is the RTA. And as your mayor, I want you to know how important RTA is to the town of Marana. I mean, you're going to, in the next few months before the March election, you're going to hear a lot of things, a lot of things are going to come out, you know, against RTA. But what you need to know, and Mr. Rosen will cover this tonight, is how successful and how important RTA has been for the town of Marana. And so we're going to cover RTA. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about data centers. You know, we don't have an application yet for a data center. We think that one is imminent, but we do not have one yet. And we wanted to get out in front of that. We wanted to be able to have a conversation with our community about data centers, what that means, you know, what they're going to need, it's just a very, what's the term for that? It's just a big ticket thing. I don't know. I'm stuck there. Anyway, we want to, and if you watched anything that happened with the city of Tucson, and you know and watched that, you know that they weren't able to interact with the people that were there to talk about data centers. And we want to make sure that we get out in front and have that interaction with our community, because we feel like as those applications come in, it's important for us to have that conversation with our community. So I do want to introduce council members John Officer, Councilmember Herb Kai. I know that Councilmember Terry Murphy will be here a little bit late. Councilmember Comerford is on vacation. And then the Vice Mayor fell and broke her hip. Unfortunately, she did not have one of those little clap things that, you know, call the doctor, and she had to crawl for her cell phone. So kind of a rough story. Anyway, she's doing better. She's in rehab, and so we wish her the best, and hopefully she can get healthy soon. With that, I am going to turn the time over to our town manager, Terry Rosenthal.
Good morning. Long day already. My name is Terry, and I am the town manager for the town of Marana, and we're going to kick things off with kind of a panel discussion. And I'll talk about that in a little bit here in just a second, but I want to cover a few other details. If you need a restroom, you probably passed it right on the way in. So just go back out here to your right, and that's where the restrooms are. And we have here directly on my left, Jason Angel, who is our Development Services Director. We have next to him, Fausto Burrell, who is our Public Works Director. Public Works handles like all the streets, the roads and airport. They have a wide array of responsibility. Jason's is exactly what it sounds like. He does the development that comes into town, works with the people on the zoning and what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. Then we have Mike Osborne from our Water and Wastewater Department, and that's what they handle. So he's going to be here to talk a little bit about growth in Marana relative to a very important commodity for our community, and that is water, obviously. And then Kurt Woody, who is our Economic Development Director, and that's exactly what it sounds like. And we'll ask him a few questions about what kind of businesses we're working to attract, and why in the world we haven't been able to fill the old bashes with Trader Joe's or Whole Foods or something. we'll get to those very important questions here in a minute. I will let you know that if you have questions while we're going through this, rather than raising your hand and interrupting kind of the flow of things, and also to make sure that we stay on point, because here's what often happens. I've been doing these now, I've been in public service for 40 years, and been doing this, and every time we have public meetings and we just give people the mic and allow them to ask questions, the next thing you know, we're talking about the barking dog behind their house and the neighbor that parks their car the wrong way, and how come so-and-so leaves their garbage can, and why doesn't anybody do anything about the neighbor whose garbage can is out there for 4 days and they never bring it up, and all those kinds of things. We want to make sure that we stay on point. So if you have questions, we're happy to answer those questions. We do ask that they be directed toward the topics at hand, and we have little cards that we will give you. Maybe some of you got those when you came in. If you got those, that's great. When you have one, you just kind of hold it up, and either Danielle or Andrea or someone else will grab that from you, bring it up here, and we'll ask those questions at the end. Make sense? All right, very good. So let's jump right into this, and we're gonna, where's my question sheet? Thank you.
Hold on, my mic's on. We're good now.
Got it? All right. So we're going to start over here with Jason, and I think this is a question we get a lot about growth in Miranda. We're going too fast, slow down, stop it, knock it off, right? We get those kind of things all the time. So I want to kind of throw this out to Jason here, because the town, for some people don't know this, some people don't know. Oh, there we go. There we go. All right, some people don't know this, but the town of Miranda, that's the boundaries in that kind of greenish color there. I think it's greenish. Is it green to you? Okay, good.
Turquoise.
121, we'll just call it 122 square miles. That's a lot of square miles. And only about 30 square miles of that is actually built out, 30 to 35 square miles.
Yep.
So it'll tell you the amount of available space for growth in our community. It's quite a bit. We plan on filling that? No, we don't. We're going to hear a little bit more from Jason about that when we talk about the zones and zoning and state land and all that. But from just a pure growth rate, Jason, would you say that we're growing at a faster rate in the last 2, 3, 5 years than we have been in the past? Can you kind of share some information about that with our residents?
Yeah, and actually, we've got another slide there. This is numbers for the last 10 years for residential growth in the region as well as in Marana specifically. We, as a region, average about 3,600 units per year. Talking with the experts around the region, they say we could handle 45 realistically, 4,500, but workforce is the challenge to deliver those numbers. From Marana specifically, we've been averaging around 900 single-family homes per year for that same time period. So growth has pretty much stayed steady. There are some blips here and there based upon, you'll see that when COVID hit, everyone kind of did the whole, is this going to be another 2008 recession? Things are going to go way south. It went completely the opposite way and really took off. But then you also see changes based upon the markets. Interest rates are high. New home construction slows a little bit as a result of that. But overall, growth has remained pretty steady for us as a community for the last decade, maybe even a little longer than a decade.
Yeah, and I think the mayor actually talked about this at one of the last meetings about the fact that he's been on the council for 16 or 17 years. And he said, by and large, we're at that 800 to 1,000 homes a year kind of rate and have been for as long as he's been on the council. So let's talk a little bit about areas of growth and where we kind of see that growth occurring. If you could talk about, we've got kind of 3 major areas in town. You've got the Dove Mountain area or the northeast area of Marana. You've got the northwest part of Marana, which is Old Marana. That area essentially north of Abra Valley and on the west side of I-10, and then you have southern Marana. So where do we kind of see the growth occurring, and what do we see for the Dove Mountain area?
Yeah, So the Dove Mountain area, pretty much the Dove Mountain specific plan is nearing its completion. At the very end of the world's largest cul-de-sac is the last couple developments that are being completed there. Once those are wrapped up, what's really left out here is at the roundabout right there, there is one condo plat right at the south side or the west side of the roundabout. That's been there since the very beginning of Dove Mountain, really. No interest that we've seen in wanting to advance that, but nonetheless, that's there. Everything else that exists after that is really the custom lots, small little infill lots here or there, some of them up by the Ritz-Carlton, some of them going into Canyon Pass area, but otherwise, the production home building will wrap up when those last two neighborhoods are done at the end of the road here. Outside of that, the only other big development that exists up here that is on record is the Tapestry development. That one we see every now and then. That is right across the street from the entrance into the Highlands neighborhood. We see developers from time to time that come in and say, oh, I'm interested in that. They take a look at it, and then we don't hear from them for a while. So that's really the next available development up in this area. Then Twin Peaks corridor, you'll see little things going on here or there, little neighborhoods. Those are usually 100, 150 homes when those go in. Those are still very limited opportunities in there, and those are probably 3 or 4 of them that are left to be developed in that area. The real development pressures that we see right now are along the Twin Peaks and I-10 corridor by the outlet mall. Cascada is a big development that's right across the street from the outlet mall. That is looking to advance here very soon. They're going through some of the platting phases of that development. And then everything really, where a large portion of the development pressures are, is in Northwest Marana. So up by Town Hall, up in that area, the Glen Farms neighborhood, we get to see a lot of development interest there. And that's really because a lot of the entitlements, the zoning is already in place for development to occur, and the infrastructure is controlled by the town on both sides, both the water and sewer, for us to be able to extend those capacities in that area.
Very good, thank you. Can you talk a little, since you mentioned zoning, actually, before I go to that real quick, because I think this is kind of interesting. The number of houses that were originally platted for Dove Mountain versus what's actually going to be built. Can you
Yeah, so and the original specific plan for Dove Mountains had a maximum unit cap of like 9,500 units that could be developed as part of that. When it's all said and done, it's going to be like 6,200, 6,500 units that will go in there. So nowhere near what the maximum could have been for the development, but those are numbers that are established at the very early stages based upon a number of variables that could come into play. But nonetheless, the build-out's going to come in far below what was originally approved or authorized for the Dove Mountain specific plan.
Excellent, thank you. So let's talk about zoning here and talk a little bit about how we decide what goes where and what kind of control we have over, once it's zoned, what actually ends up landing in those various areas.
We have a zoning map, if you can throw that up there.
Yeah.
I realize it's hard to see, but this is our zoning map. We have 29 different zoning districts in the town. 11 of those are residential, 2 of them are multifamily, 3 of them are commercial, 2 are industrial. And then we also have specific plan zones, which the Dove Mountain is a specific plan that can go in there. So when we look at establishing the different zoning districts within, first of all, any property owner can come in and request a rezoning of their property. It's a request they can make. We can't tell them, no, you can't make that request. But ultimately, when a rezoning is brought before the town and ultimately decided upon by the council, we're looking at our general plan is the first document that we're looking at. That is our guiding overall master plan for future development and growth of the community. That we spend typically a year to 18 months developing that, and it has to be updated every 10 years. As part of that process, we go through a very engaged public outreach process, looking at everything from all the infrastructure, streets, water, sewer, all of that. And then after the council votes to approve the plan, it then goes to the voters. So everyone in the community has to vote to approve that document. And our last general plan was approved by over 80% approval rate for that. So that's the primary guiding document when we look at what goes where. But then we also factor in things as far as future road networks and things like that, because if there's a major intersection that's going to be there, it doesn't really make sense to have single-family homes right on the busiest intersection of the community, like an I-10 in Twin Peaks. But that drives a lot of the commercial, the employment growth, all of that in those corridors.
Excellent, thank you. Can you kind of explain for us a little bit, I put the next slide up there, because I think sometimes people think that somebody shows up with an application on a Friday, and on Monday they start building, and we get that a lot. So can you explain a little bit the process that people have to go through once they decide that they want to construct something on a piece of property that is zoned for commercial or residential or whatever?
Yeah, and sometimes developers wish they could come in on Friday and start on Monday, but that's never realistic. So we put together an illustrative process here. Really what it starts with, and before this timeline, is we have a pre-application meeting. So somebody basically comes in and says, I have an idea or I have a dream for a project. And they'll sit down and we'll pull together all of our different departments and we'll talk about all the things that we'll be looking for, all the things that are necessary for them to submit an application and walk through the process of that. From there, then what you'll get into is the rezoning process. If the property has to be rezoned from, say, low density residential to a major subdivision like a Dove Mountain specific plan, they will go through that entitlement process where it requires them to submit the application. We'll have a couple of back and forths with them on things that need to be clarified, corrected, or added to it based upon code requirements. And then from there, it'll go to the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission holds a public hearing, which allows for the public engagement, public interaction. We also do require that prior to that meeting, the developer has to have a neighborhood meeting for those in the immediate vicinity of the rezoning. And then after Plan Commission, it'll go to council, where it's once again open for a public meeting, public hearing, and the council ultimately makes that decision. So that can take 9 to 12 months, depending upon the size of the project that's being requested. After that, you get into the platting phase, which once again can take another year to get through that. And then you get into what is the earthwork or the development process, which is where we're getting into the nitty-gritty detail of the engineering. They're submitting street sections for our team to take a look at. They're taking all of the different lots and we're looking at each individual lot for drainage requirements and things of that nature. And then after that, they get into the building permit process. And from the building permit process, that can take, depends upon how big of a project once again, but that can take another 3 to 6 months to complete that process. So from the time in which they raise their hand and say, I've got an idea I'd like to talk to you about, to the time that they're actually going vertical and occupying a structure, you're talking approximately 3+ years, once again, depending upon the size of a project.
So what you're saying is we're government and we move slowly.
Yes,
Is that what you're saying?
absolutely.
Okay. But we do move quicker than state government, than federal government.
That's an easy part.
That's an easy part to clear. All right, so we're going to move on. We spent quite a bit of time talking about development. Again, if you have questions on anything that Jason was talking about here, don't hesitate to grab a card, hand it to one of the ladies, and we'll get to those. So, Kurt, talk a little bit about economic development here. Specifically, I'd like you to cover what kind of businesses we're trying to attract. I'd also like you to cover why we keep putting up, and this is maybe an adjacent question as well, I don't know, but why we keep putting up car washes and storage facilities, why we keep building fast food restaurants as opposed to sit-down restaurants, why are we allowing that to happen? Economic development.
It's all my fault. I love fast food restaurants. No, we don't have that choice of what goes on that property. It's private property, And within that zone, what they have, so say it's village commercial, there may be 20, 25 different uses or different types of businesses that can go in that zone. So a private owner can say, I'm going to put fast food up, or I'm going to put up a car wash, or I'm going to put up a restaurant. It's their choice. We don't get to make that decision. So when you see storage units going up, fast food going up, car washes going up, those are retail businesses. And if the market wasn't there, they wouldn't build them. So we get a lot of emails on the storage units that get built within the town, but those storage units are practically full. So if people keep using them, then they're going to keep building them. And
So
they have
so the message, Kurt, is get rid of your junk? Is that what we're saying?
So we're all from somewhere else. I'm from Kansas City, right? We had attics and basements back where we came from, and I'm sure a lot of people around here the same. And you move out here, there's no basements. There's no attics to speak of. So people have to decide, well, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to get rid of my leftover furniture and my belongings? Or, I'm not quite ready to get rid of all this, so let's put it in a storage unit. So that's a lot of it, I think, is because of our habits and how we like to hang on to things. I have a storage unit. I'm sorry. I'm part of that group, and I have one down in Thank You at Cortero and I-10. So we moved from, and this is one of the things that happened, we moved from Oro Valley to Gladden Farms, and we downsized, went from a 2-story down to a single story and smaller square footage. And we had all this leftover things that we weren't quite ready to get rid of, and we were going to let our children decide what to do with them when our time was gone. So we've got a storage unit down at Cortero and I-10. What else I'll get to the other one, but did I miss anything else on the second end of that question?
No, I don't think. If you could cover a little bit now, kind of what it is we're doing to try and attract jobs, businesses, what types of businesses are we looking for?
So the first thing we do is develop an economic development strategic plan. This is on our website, the Marana government website, under my department, which is economic development, and you can read this plan. So it's a pretty extensive process. It takes about a year to go through it. We bring a consultant in, they interview a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of businesses, even other municipalities of what they think of Marana and where's their growth and what do you see coming to the town of Marana and what type of industries. They'll do a market analysis to see what your assets are. What sectors do we already have within the town? And then they'll take a look at the next 10 years and the popular business sectors that will be really ramping up. Do we have synergies? Do we have the type of business sectors in the town that would make sense to continue to recruit those? So there's a lot of methodology behind it. It's a long answer. I'm going to cut it off short to this. But what comes out of this plan is typically about 4 to 5 industries that they say you should be pursuing these. And what they come to is information technology, advanced manufacturing, supply chain logistics. That's an easy one. We have 19 miles of Interstate 10 that bisect our town. So logistics makes a lot of sense for the town of Marana. And then healthcare. We've got a little bit of a healthcare market already started here. We have a dialysis clinic right up the road here. We have the Marana Hospital, which is a 13-bed hospital. They can take pretty serious cases. If it's a 1-2 night stay, they'll take you. If it's more serious than that, you've got an extended stay in a hospital, then they'll move you to another larger hospital complex. We've got urgent care facilities, doctor facilities. Tucson Medical Center just purchased 32 acres in the middle of the Marana Center at Twin Peaks and I-10, right across from the outlets. They are planning a hospital campus there. They'll start that out rather slow with phasing it to medical office buildings and then moving into a small hospital. It won't be a large one like the one they have right now. So healthcare, those are the 4 that came out of this plan. Now, if a company came to me that's not on this plan and they said, we're interested in the town of Marana, would I talk to them? Absolutely. Yeah, we'll talk to anybody. But those are the 4 that we should be pursuing because we already have those sectors here in the town of Marana.
All right, and one last question for you, Kurt Woody. Are you going to get a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's in the old Bashes? Pressure's on, man.
Never say,
want to know.
never say never, but Trader Joe's hates me. because they actually have a place on their website where you can download documents, site plans, places where you think would be a great place for them to go. And I do it every 3 months. And I keep bugging them, and I keep sending them emails. One of the things about Trader Joe's, you know, it took a long time just to get a Fry's up in the middle of Gladden Farms area. It took 15 years, 15 plus years. They have some pretty tight metrics. In fact, they weren't even going to come at one time. They were going to sell the land, and they wanted us to rezone it. We didn't. That's another long story, but they did. They built. But Trader Joe's has even stronger metrics than Fry's. So when I contact them, they say two things. Two of the things that they look at are rooftops in the general area. And you would think that Trader Joe's would be very successful here. I believe it would be. And they also look at drive time to the next Trader Joe's that they have. So if you can get to that Trader Joe's over on Oracle Road in a reasonable time in their book, then they don't tend to build too close to another one. What they're not seeing is all the population west of I-10. And I'm trying to get that through to their heads that you're not just looking at Dove Mountain Tangerine Corridor. You're looking at all of Gladden Farms. Everyone, down South Miranda, Continental Ranch, Missile Base Road, Red Rock. All of those people are going to shop if there was a Trader Joe's at this place. Now, they typically take a smaller footprint, which is not a big deal because that old Bash is 50,000 square feet, and Trader Joe's likes to be in around 25,000. Fine, put a wall right down the middle. It's not from lack of trying. And we're trying to do that. We also have, not us, but the owner of the property has a commercial real estate broker that is also trying to promote grocery and fill that space for the owner. But we're busted on our rear ends trying to get something specialty grocery up here. I don't know if it's going to happen, but Trader Joe's going to get sick of me for sure.
All right, thanks, Kurt. We're going to move on to infrastructure because that's another very important element of growth. And we'll start off here with Mike talking about water. And I think this is one of those things that people always want to know. We live in a desert. How are we going to sustain the growth of these homes and have enough water to make sure that when everybody that's already a resident here turns on the faucet, water comes out, they flush it, it goes someplace. How are we going to ensure that?
Yeah, so the town of Miranda is in what's known as the Tucson Active Management Area. So that's an area designated by the Arizona Department of Water Resources. So we are required for every gallon of water we pump out of the ground, we have to put a gallon of water back in the ground. And that goes for every water provider in the town of Miranda. And there's multiple water providers, not just Miranda Water in the town. There's Tucson Water, which we're in a Tucson Water jurisdiction right now, Oro Valley, Metro. So there's a number of them. So all of our water providers that are in the town of Miranda are held to that same standard that for every gallon of water we pump out of the ground, we have to put a gallon back in the ground. And we have to designate, it's called the designation of assured water supply. So we have to guarantee that we have 100 years of water for every single house. And we do that through that designation, which is the plan where we go out and we find the water, we get the water to be able to replenish the aquifer here locally.
Can you talk like a little bit about that aquifer and what that aquifer, the health of that aquifer? Is it going down? Is it coming up? What's the status, the health of the aquifer that we draw from?
Yeah, so throughout the whole region in the Tucson Active Management Area, we've actually seen a steady increase in the aquifer levels over the last couple of decades here. And that's due to all the hard work that all the water providers have done to be able to meet that safe yield, that gallon for gallon. So all of the water providers, Miranda Water, Tucson Water, all of us have been able to make that happen, that water level to increase in this area.
So talk a little bit more about that from what's causing that? Is it efficiency in appliances? Is it, what are some of those things? And then also covering that perhaps, what happens when you build homes in farmland, if you could talk about that, because I think that's a pretty unique thing that a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah, so
talk about those two things.
Yeah. So what causes, what is the major driver of that, the aquifer level increases, is a lot of the conservation efforts that a lot of the local utilities have put in place to be able to save that water, to keep it in the ground and not require so much water to go to each individual house. And then Another big contributing factor to that is the Santa Cruz River that runs right through the middle of the town of Marana here. So all of that water in the Santa Cruz River ends up infiltrating back down into the aquifer to help raise those levels as well. Can you remind me of the second part of that question?
Agriculture.
Farmland, absolutely. So what we are seeing here, especially in the northeast part of Marana, or northwest part of Marana here, is a lot of that farmland is getting converted from agriculture to residential. So a typical acre of agricultural land uses 3.5 acre feet of water per acre per year. So trying to keep the numbers small here, so we're just looking at 1 acre of farmland growing throughout the year, various different crops, averages 3.5 acre feet per acre per year. An average subdivision, Kirsch, I'm telling you.
Who said Miranda's in the dark?
You got this nice blue light behind us.
Yeah.
What did you do back there, Andre?
Kurt, do your shadow puppets.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go, got some lights going back on.
All right, so I'm sorry, keep going, Mike.
Yeah, so
Push through.
a typical acre of subdivision of houses uses about 2.4 acre feet per acre per year. So there is a significant water savings when a property is converted from agricultural to residential. And kind of likewise, when a property is converted from agriculture to, say, industrial or manufacturing, depending, there's a wide range of uses of industrial manufacturing that we see in the area, but those typically use about 1.2 acre feet per acre per year of water.
All right, very good. So now we're gonna slide over and talk a little, because we've been going a little bit longer than we typically have.
Yep.
So we're gonna need to kind of go quickly. I hate to shortchange you, Fausto.
It's all right.
But, let's talk a little bit about transportation, specifically our roadways, and what we're doing to ensure that people can get where they need to get to without being held up at trains and lights and stuff like that. So, Fausto, it's yours.
The trains is a little bit difficult to contend with. The lights, I'll take the blame for that one. So as we're speaking about development, what happens when a development comes in is they do all the engineering and everything that you saw on the slide up there as part of the process. That happens. As part of that, there's also transportation elements they look at. So every development that comes in does what's called a transportation impact analysis, a TIA. And they look at all those impacts and they have to mitigate them. Or they have to, whether it's a large master plan community, they need to put in the roadway network and perhaps do some improvements to existing network to be able to facilitate that. So we look at all those for every development that comes in. Some of the efforts that the town does to also try to get ahead of that is we have master planning documents. Every one of the groups up here has master planning. The water, wastewater has master planning, transportation, and of course you heard about the general plan. That's our master planning document that's our guidebook. For transportation specific, we do have a transportation document that we did fairly recently, and that lets us know where we need to improve our network. That's based on growth and potential growth, and looking at, again, based on zoning, based on what we know we're forecasting, seeing in the future. We work with our regional partners, PAG, we use their models, and then we take that data and we actually come up with our network to see where we're gonna need improvements on that network, where we're gonna need roadway connections that don't exist, or where we need to improve the road that currently exists. Interchanges, again, talking about Terry with the trains, those type of things are also part of that analysis. Now, the interchanges aren't the town of Marana's, those belong to ADOT, but obviously that's a lifeblood for the town, that's a corridor. You heard Kurt talk about, some of the logistics types things, some of those, that's all part of that, of course, getting that, not only the goods through the region, through the town, but also getting all of our citizens to work back and forth and in a safe manner. And you're definitely going to hear a little bit more about this as far as when the RTA comes up and provides their discussion on some of those big picture, looking at the region, but also how the town is looking at leveraging our partners and working with the ADOTs, working with the region to try to build some of these big ticket improvements that we definitely need.
All right, thank you, Fausto. I have no idea what you said in the last 4 seconds.
It was all good.
It was all good. All right. Well, because we've been going a little bit long here, I'm going to jump right into some of our questions here. And the first one here is about growth, and it deals specifically, Jason, with the Tortolita Preserve. So what is the status of the purchase of the Tortolita Preserve? This one, we could probably have the mayor speak to, because it's one that's near and dear to his heart that he's working towards. So if you could just kind of talk a little bit about that process and where we're at with it.
Yeah, so the Tortolita Preserve, it's the 2,400 acres just down the road here. That is currently under a lease, a 99-year lease. We're about 20 plus years into that lease. But the town is actively engaged with Arizona State Land Department, talking to them specifically about trying to acquire that property, making it a permanent ownership of the town. So we're, I'll say, early in the process as far as those conversations, but we are working with them to figure out what is the path to ultimately get there to acquire that and making it a permanent ownership of the town.
And they seem open to
Yeah, absolutely. But as part of that conversation, it also involves property that surrounds the preserve. State Land Department, as part of their operations, they have a responsibility to ultimately the parties that are the beneficiaries to the property that is sold to deliver the highest and best value of that. So in order to bring the value of the Tortolita Preserve down to a point where it's actually financially feasible for the town, there's going to have to be some transfers of development rights to the adjacent properties in order for that to happen. But that's a whole long drawn-out process, a part that we haven't gotten to yet, but it is definitely, they've been very engaged with us and showing a willingness to have that conversation.
Excellent, thank you. So this one, this person cheated. They put 3 questions on one. I'm just kidding. All right, that was a joke. You guys can laugh if you want. All right, so the first one is, when is the new Tangerine I-10 overpass? And I'm assuming that somebody's asking when we're going to have a grade separated interchange. I'm going to cover this real quick, Fausto.
Go ahead.
We are right now in the middle of, in fact, they started constructing, doing improvements to the I-10 and Tangerine interchange. And that is essentially going to lengthen the on and off ramps, add additional lanes on the on and off ramps. Essentially what it's going to do is it's going to make it look exactly like Cortero, a little bit better than Cortero, and it's going to greatly improve. It's not going to go over the railroad itself, though. That will come later on, and we're going to talk about that in the RTA next. The next one is just says no data centers, and we'll talk about data centers here in a little bit. And the okay, this one doesn't deal with what we're talking about, so we'll move on to, will we be building, okay, Fausto, this is for you, my friend. Will we be building another way in the Dove Mountain to alleviate traffic? If there were a fire in the Tortolitas, it would be devastating loss of life. So another way in and out. In fact, there's a couple of ones that talk about that.
So I can actually talk to a little bit of both of those. In the long-range plan, there is a connection from Dove Mountain going towards I-10, and I'll leave it at that because we don't have any more detail, but eventually there will be a connection that would get you to I-10. How that looks exactly, I don't know at this point, and actually some of the discussions that Jason mentioned are part of that framework as we're looking at those properties, because all of that land in question is state land. The other item, and I can't remember which one, there was a podcast that I was part of, but I was actually more of a spectator, that Northwest Fire, our chief, did a very great job of explaining the fire situation and how a fire that you've seen back in the California region is not something that would happen in this area just because of the climate, the vegetation. There's a lot of reasons, and he said it very eloquently in that podcast, so I would ask you to listen to that.
Yeah, everybody here familiar with the fact that the town has a podcast called Real Talk with the Town? My name is Jerry, and I'm your host.
So wait for him to do that.
Okay, we got somebody nodding over here, so thank you. We have one fan in the audience. I greatly appreciate it, even though you're a Purdue fan. Also, go Blue, I'm a Michigan fan. So we do have a podcast. Just about everything we talked about here today is in a podcast out there. So I highly encourage you to go onto the website and look through, I think there's some 88 different episodes in the last 2 years that we've put out there. And they cover everything from this very topic about the additional way in and out, fires on the mountain, all of that thing. Fire Chief Brad Bradley did an awesome job on that. So those are great questions, and he does a great job of answering them. So there's a number of questions here that don't have anything to do with what we're talking tonight. And we absolutely want to answer those questions. We will follow up, and we've done this with every single one of them, right? The other 2 ones we did as well. We'll follow up with you by the end of the week and get a response to you on your question if it doesn't directly relate to what we're talking about here tonight. One here about water and why there's so many water providers in Marana, and will that ever change?
Yeah, so there are.
What's kind of the history is the other portion of the question to that. What's
Yeah.
the history behind that?
Yeah, so the Town of Marana Water, Department of Marana Water, is a fairly young utility. We started in 1997, and by that point, there was a large number of developments in the area, in the Town of Marana, Dove Mountain, Continental Ranch, those areas, and Tucson Water at that time had designated those areas as their obligated service area. As they were the only provider in the area that could reasonably get to them and provide that utility at the time, they went ahead and served those areas. And same with, a utility like Metro Water or Oro Valley Water, been around a little bit longer than the Town of Marana. So as development continued, before Marana Water was established, the developers looked at who is our closest water provider and can they provide us water. And so that's how all those different water utilities came to be in the Town of Marana.
All right, and the last one here, Kurt, I'm going to have you answer this one. This is about the spec warehouses at Tangerine Road. Any update on tenants for those 2 facilities?
All right, let me give you a little bit of historical. So pre-Great Recession, developers built spec all the time because the market was so strong, they knew they were going to fill those buildings shortly after they opened the doors. Post-Great Recession, nobody built spec. The lending institutions really tightened up. They wouldn't even lend the money to the developers unless they had at least 50% of their building already pre-leased. So I begged developers for years to build spec because we needed boxes to put companies in. So along comes a developer out of Kansas City, and they do build spec, and that's what those 2 boxes are right now on the frontage road. They build spec because they have such a strong corporate following that by the time they open their doors, they've got a user for that building. One of the buildings is a little over 400,000 square feet, the other one's a little over 500,000 square feet, and that market went completely soft when they opened the doors. So there's a ton of that product up in the Phoenix area right now, and it's got to be absorbed. Yeah, we're a little bit different market down here, and we're looking for logistics and supply chains down here. There has been a lot more activity on those 2 buildings just in the past 6 months. I work with the commercial real estate broker that's working for the developer, and we've gotten pretty far down the road on one of the companies that was looking for about 250,000 square feet. Now, originally, the developer just was looking at 1 user per building. But because the market went so soft, he's now willing to quad off those buildings and put as many as 4 different businesses within each one. That opens up a big market. If you could just supply 100,000 square feet, 200,000 square feet, 250,000 square feet, not everybody needs 400,000 or 500,000 square feet. So that opened up a whole new sector for us, and we think it sooner rather than later we're going to have it done.
All right, and in 30 seconds or less, Fausto Burrell, can you answer the question of what is happening with the traffic light at Moore and Dove Mountain? Why is it a year and a half past due, and when is this thing going to happen?
So what happened is there was some logistics. As you know, we're still dealing with a little bit of material
30 seconds or
acquisition.
less.
All right, I'm trying. Material acquisition, poles are a long lead item, in the best of times, and then as part of this, there were real long lead items. So it took a while, longer than planned, for the poles to come in. And then as part of it, we also had to send the poles back out to get painted or powder coated to the color, to meet the color scheme for the Dove Mountain area. So now they're the tan color. So that project was actually pushed on pause. It's actually an ADOT driven project because there's federal funds tied to it, but it is back up and running, and that signal should be in by the end of October, or end of this month to the beginning of next month, is my understanding.
All right, and one last question, very quickly, for Jason. Where is it here? Status of Mandarina South development.
They have the zoning in place. They have not begun any of the plating to move that forward. I take it back. They've done some of the plating, but they have not gotten to where everything is final platted for development. So the focus right now is just the Mandarina development itself.
All right. Well, give a round of applause for our panelists here. I think we're average. All right, so we're going to jump right into, and I appreciate your questions, and I know we didn't get to all of them. You guys had some really great questions. By far, the most number of questions, the mostest of all the places we've been to, you had the most questions. So kudos to you, greatly appreciate that. The questions that weren't answered here today, we will follow up and send you an email with a response to each one of those questions. So we're going to talk about RTA, and Steve, oh, there's Steve. Steve is going to go ahead and, where's the other mic? Right here. Steve is going to lead us through kind of an overview of the RTA and from a 30,000 foot level, kind of what the RTA is, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about the projects for the town of Marana. So I'll come up as soon as Steve said.
Do you have the clicker?
I do.
All right.
But
I mean, this is the best slide of the whole presentation. No, my name is Steve Huffman. I work for the Pima County Regional Transportation Authority. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be here. I was a little bit worried with the technical problems we were having that you weren't going to be able to enjoy my 45-minute PowerPoint. No, I'm just kidding. It's not that long. So, but tonight, just so you know what to expect, I'm going to give you a little bit of history of the RTA, tell you what we're doing in the community, and tell you what's coming up next. So to start off, how many of you were either living here in Marana or somewhere around here in Pima County back in 2006? Okay. So for those of you who weren't here, in 2004, the state legislature passed legislation that allowed the people of Pima County to form a regional transportation authority. With that legislation, it allowed us to go to the voters and put together a 20-year transportation plan. And the only way to pay for that transportation plan is with a voter-approved half-cent sales tax. So back in 2006, we went to the voters with a plan. The voters approved the plan and the half-cent sales tax. And I don't want to keep beating on this, but I just want to make sure you understand. It's a 20-year plan and it expires in June of 2026. And so we will have in March a new 20-year plan. The only way we can pay for that plan is with a voter-approved half-cent sales tax. So when you go to the ballot, you'll see two questions on the ballot. One is the transportation plan. One is the half-cent sales tax to pay for the plan. You don't have to vote for both of them, but if you don't vote for the sales tax, there's no money to pay to implement the transportation plan. So the other thing I want to make sure you know, the Pima County Regional Transportation Plan, we are not part of the Pima County government. We have a board of directors made up of mayors and leaders of every city and town, the 2 Indian tribes, and a representative from ADOT. So we all work together as a community, but we are an independent body, not part of any local government. So the benefits of the RTA, we invested in the first plan about $1.7 billion. You can see different projects. We've got traffic interchanges. We do safety improvements in intersections. We do bike paths, sidewalks, so it's not just road work, bus transit, bike lanes. So we invest a lot of money in all sorts of different transportation, just not in road projects.
I always tell people, if you get nothing out of this tonight, this is probably the most important slide. If investing in transportation and infrastructure is important to you in our community, you can see here we get on an annual basis about $50 million coming in from state and federal funds to help us fund transportation and infrastructure in our community. We get from the voter-approved half-cent sales tax about $126 million a year. So you can see about 2/3 of all the money we have on an annual basis to pay for transportation improvements here in Peay County come from that half-cent voter-approved sales tax. Now imagine if you were trying to pay your bills and overnight you lost 2/3 of your income and you had to pay the same bills. If investing in infrastructure is important to you, the current authority expires in 2026, and we will lose that 2/3 of funding that we have available for transportation improvements. So the RTA, the voter-approved half-cent sales tax, is a significant portion of funds available to improve transportation and infrastructure in Peay County. And you can see what that would look like without that half-cent sales tax. This is important. Everything that you normally buy that you have to pay a sales tax on, that half-cent sales tax to go to the roads is included in that. So when you go to any sort of store or anything like that, I want to point out that groceries and pharmaceuticals are exempt from that half-cent sales tax. But the other important part of this slide is I want to make sure you understand why we do a sales tax. There are other alternatives that we could do to pay for transportation infrastructure. For example, we could have a bond election, go to the voters, ask them to approve bonds, but those bonds would be paid back solely by property owners, homeowners, and business owners who pay property taxes here in Peay County. With a sales tax, everybody that uses the roads pays for our transportation improvement, including tourists, winter visitors, people just passing through. Anybody that uses our roads and buys something will pay that half-cent sales tax. So everybody contributes to improving our infrastructure. Everybody that uses the road pays for that. The other important thing that I want to make sure, I told you the current authority expires in June 2026. We have an election in March 10th. The new tax will become effective as of April 1st. At that time, the old tax, the existing tax that you've been paying for almost 20 years now will go away. The new tax will start on April 1st, so there will never be an overlap period of double taxation. The tax rate that you're paying right now will be the same one that you pay after this election. So there will not be a tax increase as a result of this passing in March. The RTA Next plan, and if you haven't picked one of these up, we have them at the front table. This is a list of all the new projects that are in the RTA Next, but we will continue to invest in roadway corridor improvements, safety, ADA active transportation, that is bike paths, sidewalks, things like that. This is a new program that we're doing. We're investing in arterial and collector road pavement rehabilitation. We are, by state law, not allowed to go fill potholes. That's the job of your local governments like the town of Marana. But we have money set aside, about $177 million to go in and completely basically destroy and repair roads that are failing right now. So we will be rehabilitating roads that are in bad shape. We also invest money in environmental wildlife linkages. You can see a picture of that animal overpass. Sometimes people ask me about this. They're like, really? We're putting money in overpasses and underpasses for wildlife? And obviously it's a benefit to the wildlife. But one of the major reasons we do that is you don't want to be going down the road and have some sort of critter run in front of your car, and next thing you have a 7-car pile up in the road. So we actually have figured that we can identify places where there's a lot of migration back and forth with wildlife. It helps them, but it also helps us. It's for our safety just as much as for the animals. And then we also make significant investments in transit, which is through buses, but it also includes paratransit services. Let's see if this slide works. So this is the footprint of the major transportation corridors that we did through the original 2006 plan that was approved by the voters. The blue are transportation corridors that will be included in the plan that will be on the ballot in March of next year. So you can see between the two, and now this is not talking about bus pullouts, this is not talking about the safety improvements, sidewalks, bike routes, any of those other things that we do. This is just the transportation corridors. But you can see between the two plans, we've had a significant impact on our entire community from one corner to the next of Pima County. And you can see Terry's going to talk about some of the Marana specific projects, but you can see in particular, we're really excited about the fact that we're going to have, you've got the Twin Peaks interchange, which is one of our projects. We're going to have interchanges like that at Moore Road, at Tangerine, and Cortera in the Marana area as part of the RTA next one. So we're making significant investments in this community, and there are other projects in addition to that. The RTA, the first RTA plan over the last 20 years, we've completed over 1,000 RTA projects. We've invested directly $1.6 billion in transportation improvements, but that investment has allowed us to leverage more than $3 billion in public-private money, in addition to the money that we invested through the half-cent sales tax. So there's a multiplier effect on making transportation investments in our community. We also commissioned an economic impact study, and we determined through that study that there are 40,000 permanent jobs that exist here in Pima County specifically because of the investment in transportation. And that just makes sense. Talk to Kurt about everything he does to bring business in here. If you got a community with failing, aging infrastructure, you're fighting an uphill battle to convince people to move their businesses, to expand their businesses. Transportation and infrastructure is a huge part of us being competitive economically and creating jobs in our community. We've estimated with the passage of RTA Next that we can expect another 88,000 new jobs to be created, and we can leverage about $3.7 billion in economic investment in our community. We're almost done here, so the last thing, just some things that we learned about the first RTA. One of the things that we've done when we put together this new plan, we didn't anticipate when we put this on the ballot in 2006 that in 2008 we'd be going through one of the largest recessions ever. We didn't anticipate the pandemic. We didn't anticipate the inflation that all of us felt with. And all those affected our transportation plans that we put together in 2006. So what we did this time is we adopted a little more conservative revenue targets so that we've got a little more wiggle room if we have another recession, something like that. We've got citizen committees that oversee everything that the RTA does to make sure we're keeping our word to the voters. And ultimately, you guys are in charge. So if you want to scan that QR code, or you can go to rtanext.com and you can look up all this information, all the information I showed to you. But we hope that this is a plan. It's not going to fix all of our problems, but there's something in there that's going to make your life better for everybody. And with that, I'll turn it over to Terry. I appreciate your time. I'm happy to take any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So I'm going to cover real briefly here. Is the clicker over here? First off, I'll just kind of talk about, for those maybe who haven't been around Marana for a while, if you're fairly new here, the first RTA, the one that you talked about, started in 2006 and will end in 2026. These are the projects that Marana benefited from. The Twin Peaks Road, including the interchange, so on the west side of the freeway, the connection there into Continental Ranch and Continental Reserve, and then the construction of that beautiful interchange that we see there. And that obviously produced a lot of economic development in that area, and will continue. There's a lot more coming with the Cascada development. Then, of course, Ina Road, if you ever had to drive on Ina Road before that interchange was there, you're taking your time into your own hands because you never knew what was going to happen at Ina Road. But again, a very beautiful interchange there. Then, of course, Community Marana, or Twin Peaks, all the way up into Dove Mountain, which is a great connection from the Dove Mountain community down to the I-10 and Twin Peaks area. So really a fantastic roadway. It's a beautiful drive too. And then the Tangerine Road widening, which is still ongoing, obviously. That started all the way at Oracle, so it was a combination of Oro Valley, Piedmont County, and Marana. Right now that terminates at Dove Mountain and Twin Peaks here. But we're building right now the widening from I-10 up to, I forget the name of the road, but it's essentially where the water tank is there on Tangerine. So that's phase 2A, and then we're going to complete phase 2B, which will be from that terminus all the way up to Dove Mountain. All right, so that's all a part of RTA 1. And we'll go now into the projects for RTA Next that will directly affect us. So the first one there is Moore Road and I-10, and this is going to be our #1 project, and that's a grade separated interchange at Moore Road. So if you think about where Moore Road is here in Dove Mountain and where it terminates into the, basically the access to the Tortolita Preserve, all the way at I-10 on the other side, there's a Moore Road that connects into the interchange there, the frontage road. We're going to build a grade separated interchange at that location. Eventually, that road will come all the way through to Dove Mountain, so there'll be another ingress and egress out of Dove Mountain at Moore Road. People asked about an alternative way out of Dove Mountain. That will be the first alternative way out of Dove Mountain. But what we're going to focus on first and foremost is Moore Road and I-10 grade separated interchange over the railroad track. The reason this one is #1 and the reason it's so important is because Tangerine and I-10, when we go to build a grade separated interchange there, we have to shut the interchange down, right? You can't build a grade separated interchange and keep the interchange open. We have to shut the whole thing down. So without some other way to the freeway, that's going to be really difficult. So that's why Moore Road becomes a very important project for us, and that'll be the first one for the town of Marana right out the gate. Then we'll do Tangerine, so we'll do Moore Road, we'll follow that up with Tangerine, and then we'll go down and pick up Portero. That doesn't make the people in Continental Ranch and Continental Reserve and in that area that go and shop around there extremely happy, but it is reality. And there's 3 reasons that Portero will be bumped down further. #1, the costs. That project is going to be extremely expensive, probably in the neighborhood of 300 million, 250 million. 250 to 300 million. Rick, you agree with that? So Rick from RTA is here, and he agrees with that. 250 to 300 million. So #1, it's a very expensive project. There's a lot of businesses and land acquisition that has to happen there in order for that interchange to go in. And if you've ever tried to buy up somebody's business, that takes a while. So that process takes a while. Then you put on top of that the fact that, quite frankly, we're not ready for that. We need to build some connections from Cortero north to Linda Vista so people can get onto I-10 from Twin Peaks and I-10 going down Linda Vista, and then also hopefully Camino del Oeste down to Ina. So that would get traffic north and south when they have to close down Cortero, because that's going to be a mess for a while, without question. And so you can see kind of the money's there too. I'm going to talk about that here in just a minute. I'll come back to it. And then Ina Road is going to be widened. If you spend any amount of time on Ina Road, it gets pretty congested. We're going to add a lane eastbound and a lane westbound. We're going to take out the bike lanes on Ina that are actually on the road, and we're going to create a bike road, if you will. There's going to be a 12-foot wide bike path that the bikes can ride on, so they don't have to be on Ina Road. So that'll most likely be on the north side of Ina Road, but that'll help a lot with the safety there. And it'll also help with the congestion that we have on Ina Road. And that'll go from Ina and I-10 eastward all the way to Camino de la Tierra, or essentially where the wash is there on the other side of Thornydale, just a little bit east of Thornydale. So now we'll talk about the money real quick. The 30/90, 25/160, that is representative of the monies that are coming from different pots, different different places. So the 30 million, the money on the left is the money that's going to come from RTA. 30 million from RTA leverages an additional 90 million from ADOT. So ADOT says, look, you come to the table with this, we'll come to the table with the rest of it. So that's what you're seeing here in these other 3 projects here that are ADOT facilities. They're not Town of Marana facilities, they're ADOT facilities. They're going to come to the table with what's necessary to make up the difference to complete those projects. So we're coming in with 25 million for Tangerine, they're going to come in with 160. And you want to know what the difference is between the cost of each one of those interchanges. You say, well, they're all except for inter. Why is the cost so different? The first one is because you can build it completely offline. There's no interchange there at Moore Road, right? So we don't have to worry. It's kind of like the one they're building down there at, what is that, Rootsville? Or, what is it? Sunset, thank you. Yeah, Sunset Links. Right, they're building that one completely offline. They don't have to shut down traffic. They don't have to worry about diverting traffic, all of that. So that's why Moore Road is much less expensive. Tangerine's more expensive because you do have to shut down the road, divert traffic, and do all those things, and tear apart and build back up. Cortero is so expensive because you have to tear down and build back up, but also you have to purchase a bunch of businesses along there. So that's why that becomes very expensive. So we get $91.3 million in RTA money, and we leverage $486 million from ADOT. So you see the benefit to the town of Marana in terms of a financial investment, not only from the RTA, but from the state as well. Then there's a couple of projects here. Okay, so I've kind of probably hit on all of this, but you know, that's the location. I mean, it's hard to read on that map, but that's the location of Moore Road. It's about halfway between Tangerine and Marana exit, right? And then, of course, the Tangerine, which I'm sure you're all familiar. You probably used that many times. And then the Cortero and I-10 interchange. And again, that's a great separated interchange over the railroad. So you don't have to deal with stopping at trains. And then the distance of the Idle one, that one doesn't show it all the way, but it goes past Thornydale, maybe a quarter of a mile. And then a couple of projects that will have a direct impact on Marana residents, even though a majority of what they're going to build is not actually in Marana. There's a short portion of Silver Bell, South Alina that is in Marana, maybe a half mile, a little bit more, 3/4 of a mile. On Silver Bell, and that's going to be widened from Ina all the way down to Camino del Cerro, thank you. That's going to have the bike paths and the sidewalks and all of those things. So the reason that's really important, people don't think about this, but it's very important. You know, in my previous life in law enforcement, I can tell you that when they shut down the road, the interstate, when DPS has a fatality and they shut it down, trying to get people north and south in Marana is extremely difficult. And having that 4-lane road that goes all the way from North Marana all the way down into the city of Tucson helps tremendously when you have a place to divert them. When you're trying to divert them into a 2-lane road, extremely difficult. Then also Thornydale, we have a short distance of Thornydale over there by Sky Ranch that is in Marana, but the majority of the work that's going to be done is going to widen it to 4 lanes, again, bike paths and sidewalks from Tangerine all the way down to Cortero. So if you go to Costco and you happen to live over in that area and you drive down Thornydale, you're not going to have to worry about that roadway anymore, because that's going to be widened in RTA next, provided you all vote for it. If you don't vote for it, then it won't be widened. That's plain and simple. All right, so that's that. And do we have any questions on RTA before we jump into our one RTA related? What is the town's position on I-11? We're not opposed to an I-11. In fact, if an I-11 does go in there, we will probably, because it's pretty close to our boundaries on the west anyway, we would probably annex out to where I-11 is and take advantage of that as well, right? Freeways create a lot of economic development opportunities for our community. So we're not opposed to it in any way. In fact, we'd love it to happen. Is it a reality? it's a possibility. Let's just put it that way. So I'm not saying there's a chance, but is it super likely in the near future? Probably not. So that is all the questions that we had directly related to RTA. Is that accurate? The rest are growth and data centers, and we will follow up. We'll do the data centers here in a minute. If they're growth related, we'll follow up with you on questions about data centers. And so now, as we move into our final topic, which is data centers, I'm going to invite up here Jane Farrell, our town attorney. Jane's been with the town for, what, 20 years?
20 years.
20 years Jane's been with the town. And asked Jason, our Development Services Director, to come back up here. And they're going to talk about data centers. And the reason that they're going to talk about data centers is because they're the ones that created an ordinance. And I'm really proud of this fact that the town of Marana is the only municipality in Arizona that in advance of any data centers coming to us, well before, because we put this in place a year ago, when we first started hearing rumblings and grumblings about data centers. And Jane and Jason worked really hard, worked a better part of a year putting together a ordinance on data centers to put us in the best position possible to deal with this kind of hot button topic, to make sure that we as a town are in the driver's seat. And I have bequeathed on both of them a PhD in data centerology because they have now so much knowledge and understanding about data centers. So I'm going to turn the mics over to them, and they're going to lead us through this presentation.
And this is some of the information we learned as we went through our process and research here. Talk about the process we took to develop the ordinance, the engagements that were there. We'll go through the ordinance at a high level. If we read through it line by line, everyone would fall asleep and be bored with it. So we'll touch on the key points there. We'll talk about the water and the power as part of that. And then we'll get into any questions that come along with that. So one of the things that we learned in going through this is these are the top 10 regions in the country for data center density population. So this is the most attractive markets for data centers out there. And as you can see, Phoenix is #2 in the entire country. North Virginia, just knowing what operations are over there, you've got a lot of military operations, government, federal government operations. So data centers, I think, make sense being a hot topic over there.
Why Arizona is a good question. And I think the #1 reason why Arizona is because the Arizona State Legislature in 2013 established the Computer Data Center Program, where they give tax incentives to data centers to come to Arizona. The data centers don't have to pay sales tax or use tax on any of their data center equipment at the state, local, or federal level in the state of Arizona. And we our slide has a summary that's from the Arizona Commerce Authority website, but I'd encourage you to go there and take a look at it yourself if you're interested. If a data center qualifies, they have an exemption from those taxes for 10 to 20 years, depending upon a number of factors. And that's right now. There is certainly a chance that the legislature could extend that further if they think it's a good idea. But when we first started hearing from potential data center developers coming to us, this was one of the first things they cited to us. This is why we're coming to you, largely because of tax incentives.
Yeah, and I think as we learn some of these larger projects that are out there, they're talking about developments that are in the billions of dollars that are going in, and the vast majority of that cost is the equipment that is tax exempt. So there's huge tax incentives that are provided by the state for those developments. So what we wanted to do is talk a little bit, so why did we create an ordinance? The town code previously did not define data centers. And as part of that, staff also started receiving some general inquiries from people that were exploring a potential interest for a data center within our community. So when we get anything that's new or out of out of the blue that we really don't deal with. One of the first calls I make is to Jane, and I'm like, Jane, we gotta sit down and talk about this, and let's see how we address this. And it's really, when you think about it from a technology standpoint, how technology has evolved over the last decade or so has really helped to drive the need for data centers in the country and around the world. And then we got into the research of this. As part of the research, what we did is not only extensively online, we didn't fly out to West Virginia, but we did do a lot of research based upon their experience because they've been dealing with them for so long of what they've learned. And Jane will talk a little bit about that a little later on. But the other part of it is we went out to the Phoenix metro area. We talked to Mesa, we talked to Chandler, we talked to the communities that were experiencing data centers in their community. One of the critical things we learned right away is Mesa didn't have a data center specific ordinance. Like Terry said, we were the first in the state to get ahead of it and create one. But what they ultimately had done was when a data center came in, they made an interpretation, staff made an interpretation that data centers would be classified as indoor self-storage. Indoor self-storage is a very common category that's placed in commercial and industrial zoning districts. Immediately upon making that determination, a lot of their key employment corridors and commercial property got gobbled up by data centers and were built. So if any of you have been up to the Eastmark neighborhood, it's on the east side of Mesa out by the airport there are a lot of data centers, large data centers that went up there. When that neighborhood was being developed, it was supposed to be one of the new up and coming premier developments in the metro area. All of the commercial pads and employment pads are pretty much data centers now. And now they're surrounded by these high electrical voltage lines that surround this. I mean, it's terrible what ended up happening there. So we used that research, the do's and the don'ts that we learned from our colleagues in other communities. We went through and drafted an ordinance, and the first thing we did, we sat down with council in a study session, and we said, here's what we got, here's what we learned. Here are some variables that we consider. How do we want to position ourselves? How do we want to approach this? And took their feedback, made some tweaks. From there, we got to what we thought is a final draft. We put it out for public comment for about 45 days, got some additional feedback from people. We looked at everything, brought it back to council and said, here's where we think we're at, and took it through the adoption process. And in December of 24, we adopted the ordinance. I shouldn't say we, the council adopted the ordinance.
So as we were doing our research that Jason mentioned in Northern Virginia in particular, since they have been dealing with data centers for 15, 20 years already, they've gone through a few iterations of their codes because they found things that didn't work, things that did work. So that was actually very helpful to us to look at a bunch of information from various types of consultants to see what you should address in an ordinance if you're going to have one about data centers and suggestions on how to address it. These items on the bullets I'll talk about in a minute, but overall our concern was not in writing a data center ordinance that would be in favor of data centers or that would be against data centers. What we knew was that we were going to get some applications that have become clear to us by the number of people inquiring and just by observing what was happening in the Phoenix Valley and around the country and around the world. The applications were going to come. So our overall objective was just to try to put the town of Marana and the town citizens in the best position possible when we got an application of how to handle that. So the issues here, location, obviously, if you're going to have a data center or more than one data center, you want to make sure it's in the best location it could possibly be in. So that was one of the first things that we wanted to address, and we'll talk about how we did address that in future slides. Noise, there have been some issues, not always, depending upon where the data centers are and how they've been built, but there have been in some locations some noise issues. And we wanted to try to build in some noise attenuation features into our ordinance to try to alleviate, mitigate noise concerns. Appearance is an issue. What we didn't want was some ugly box of a building in the middle of the desert, if we can help it. So we've got both some building design regulations and some site design regulations that we'll talk about in a little bit. And then, of course, I'm sure you all know about the concerns related to both water and power, because they are heavy users of power, can be heavy users of water. And so those were things that we were looking at as well. And we'll talk about each of them.
So in the new ordinance, first thing we did was define a data center. What is it? And what does it contain? Then we looked at developing standards for both a principal and accessory use. A principal use is the primary use that's established on the property. So think of it from your home. Your home is the primary use or principal use of your property. If you have a detached garage, that is an accessory to yours. So in this case, the example we used when we talked about it with council is an accessory use might be like, let's say a large medical campus wanted to be built here, and there's going to be a hospital and a couple of medical professional buildings and all that. But they may also want a data center as part of that because of their technology needs. So it could be a 20,000 square foot building that sits on a large campus for a medical. So that's the example we use for an accessory use. Then, as Jane said, we got into noise standards and very specific noise standards, and then the design criteria, both from a site design, which is the property and the layouts and the buffers and everything that is included in there, and as well as the architectural elements of the building, so that it's not just that big box sitting out there.
So the definition was really important to us. For the reason that Jason mentioned, Mesa gave us an example of what not to do. And no shade or, not trying to badmouth them. I think they would tell you that if they had to do it over again, they would do it differently. It's fundamental to the whole ordinance. So we wanted to try to make sure that we got that right. And not to make light of it, but we were talking in the first presentation about how much storage facilities, how many of these self-storage facilities are going into the town. And if we called it indoor storage, could they go in all the places? Could the data centers go in all the places that the self-storage places are going? So that was really important to us to get this right. It's a facility used primarily for the storage, management, processing, and transmission of digital data. It's buildings, large buildings that have computers and servers and racks and network equipment and cooling equipment and all of those things. That's what they are. And what that provides is the cloud. That's cloud computing. That's what it looks like. I was sad to learn that it doesn't look anything like a cloud, but that's the reality of the situation. And we wanted to make sure we were covering certain types of activities that we know have the same impact to the community. So it includes cryptocurrency mining, weather modeling, any of those types of things that are in a facility like this are covered by our ordinance, because those things all have the same impact and use issues with the use that we are addressing in our ordinance. We had a question at one of our previous meetings where someone said, well, does this mean I can't do cryptocurrency mining in my house? And just to be clear, we're not regulating the activity of cryptocurrency mining. That's not in our purview. What we're regulating is the land use, the use of the land as a data center. Now, so turning to location. So Jason, earlier, one of the slides showed all our zoning designations in the town, our zoning districts. If you go to our website and you look at our Marana Town Code, we have we have a table that this is just a glimpse from it, an excerpt from it, The ag is our agricultural zoning. RA to, I think, MR are different types of residential zoning, depending on the size of the lots. Then we have multifamily, we have resort and recreation, and then NC and BC are commercial zones, and LI and HI are industrial zones. So if you put a P on any of these, that means that use is permitted in that zone. So you can see for data center, we didn't put any Ps. We didn't make it a permitted by right use in any zone in the town of Marana as a principal use. What we did was we allowed it in our industrial zones as an accessory use. So the type of use that Jason was talking about, if it was a business on a site that needs a data center to serve itself, its business, it can be there, and we put some size limitations on that. But for any of our other districts, the only way that a data center can go into that district is if they go through a rezoning process. They have to come to the planning commission and come to the town council. Ultimately, it will be the town council's decision. And so that's how we're going to regulate where they go if we get an application.
So I touched on this a little bit earlier about the rezoning process. So Jane said that, you know, if any data center use is to be considered, it requires them to go through a rezoning process. So we have, it's another way of what I illustrated in that graph earlier, but the citizen review process is that public engagement. So that would be, as part of their neighborhood meeting, they would have to send out notices to all property owners within 300 feet of the subject site. They would have to hold a neighborhood meeting with those individuals, talk through, explain the project, address issues or questions that they have. And then we also post signs on the property advertising the town's meetings that will be coming up. And that's the Plan Commission and the council. Once again, public hearings that have to go out. We also, as the town, send direct mailings to all individuals within 300 feet, notifying them of those meetings. We also advertise in the paper, and we post it on our website when those meetings are as well. So the rezoning process, we jokingly call this a very specific plan because, as you may recall early on, we do have a zoning category that says a specific plan. Specific plan for a neighborhood development, a Dove Mountain development is completely different than the process that we spell out here for a data center. So they are required to provide a high level of detail as part of an application that comes forward to us. So they'll have to have a baseline noise study. What was required is, what is the existing conditions of the noise in that environment right now? And what would this project's projected noise volumes be based upon? And they have to have attenuations and graphics that illustrate how noise would travel in the environment and how they plan to achieve the levels that are established as far as maximum decibel readings at given periods of time. They have to identify the intended source of an electric provider. What we would be looking for as part of an application is they're going to have a letter from either TEP or TRICO that says we have sufficient power that is able to provide service to this development now and going into the future. And so that's a requirement. Part of that, and we'll talk with TEP here in a little bit, but that gives the town the representation that they're involving the appropriate parties to make sure everyone's aware and that we're not approving an application or considering an application that hasn't even been thoroughly vetted by others that would have to be engaged. The assessment of future energy needs I talked about, the water consumption for the site, and there's a footnote at the bottom in blue here. Our ordinance very specifically includes language that says Marana Water will not provide water for the cooling system of a data center.
Potable water.
Potable.
Drinking water.
Drinking water, yeah. Mayor Honey, bless his heart, he was very adamant in the study session that we include that language in there. We will not even consider. The only water that Town of Marana would provide to it would be like we would for any other business or household, and that is for the office use, the bathroom use, that element of it. But for the large cooling system, you cannot use our potable water for that. And then the last part of it is, as part of their application, if they're unable to meet any portion of the requirements that are specifically outlined in the ordinance, they have to call it out and explain why they are not doing it. So it doesn't force us to dig through the application and say, well, they're trying to skate around this or they're missing that. It specifically calls things out so that it can be clearly represented to the mayor and council. Here's where they're saying they're not going to meet our requirements. And then whatever discussion may need to be had can be clearly had at that point.
To get into the building design standards a little bit, and again, there's more in the ordinance than what's on this slide. If you want to go look at that on our town code, please do. I'm not going to go over every bullet point, but we were trying to require neutral palettes, so we didn't have like bright red buildings or something like that. We wanted to be a neutral palette that kind of blends in with the environment, looks good with it. That we don't want the colors acting as advertisements or billboards for whoever the data center ends up being occupied by. Building exteriors, showing materials with texture and character, changes in massing and offsets, recesses. It's not up there, but we require a certain percentage of fenestration, which is the placement of windows and doors. It may be fake windows in some cases since it is the desert, but we want it to try to be an attractive looking building is what we're going for here. And then the last bullet there, all buildings have to have at least 5 of those things listed there, overhangs or recesses or arcades or tower elements, variations in the roof line, trying to avoid just a big rectangle. I joked around at our last one, we had even more in our first draft, and we got a little pushback that Jason and I were trying to act like we were architects when we're really not. And it was going to end up looking ugly because we were asking for too much. So we pulled back a little bit, provided a little more flexibility, but still with some pretty stringent requirements. And I think the key is that they will have to address this in their applications to the town and make sure that they are presenting us with something that isn't, hideous, I guess.
So from a site design standpoint, a couple of things we looked at is wanting to make sure that we have protections in place that are built in that clearly put it up front to the applicant that they have to maintain at least 400 feet from any property line to adjacent property that is either planned or zoned for residential land uses. We want a massive buffer, and through our research, this is one of those things that we presented to mayor and council, and we said, here's the range of buffers that we've seen, 50 to 400. Council all said 400 looks good. So we went as far as we could based upon the research that was presented and put that in place.
And just sorry to interrupt, but that will also play a part in where a data center could go, obviously, because it depends a little bit on what's already there. If we get an application.
Yeah, and if you lay it on the zoning map that's there, we have a number of properties that are already identified. They're not built upon, but they're already zoned or entitled for residential development. So even if it's not a home that exists there, it's planned for, so it further limits their abilities. Then there's 100 feet from a property line adjacent that is planned or zoned for any use other than residential or industrial. So it's a 100-foot separation from like commercial zoning. Industrial, we do not have a separation requirement. It's an industrial use in really that category. For generators, this is one of those areas that Jane became an expert, probably could sell generators now. She learned a lot, and ultimately it's a Tier 4 generator is what we are calling for. A Tier 4 generator is the latest and greatest generator out there that is the most efficient as far as cutting down on emissions and energy usage. And so we want the best. We want it to be, if you're going to use generators, they are to be only used for emergency purposes. Any testing of those generators have to be done during the daytime, during regular business hours. So we spell all that out in the ordinance as well as that is just an emergency service, and that it should not be a disruption to any of the adjacent properties.
So water, we've already touched on it a little bit, but as we said in the previous slide, the application will be required to provide us with an estimate of an annual water consumption for the site. That doesn't mean that they can't go above that amount or below that. We're just trying to evaluate what the needs are going to be for this site. And then they also have to provide the intended source of water for the site. So as we've said before, Marana Water Department, we currently only provide potable water service at this time. We don't have a non-potable service. We used to when I first started with the town 20 years ago, but we actually sold that to the Cortero Marana Irrigation District. So most likely in the town of Marana, the question I know is, well then who would provide them with the non-potable water that they need? It's most likely the irrigation district that exists in northwestern Marana as their main service area. So we would provide, again, the drinking water for employees at the site, for office uses, bathrooms, kitchens, that kind of thing. But we will not provide it for cooling and similar needs on the site. This slide actually, I think, would have been displayed in the previous, when Mike was up here to talk about it, but when we were having the audio-visual problems, it didn't come up. But it shows that, so the most likely spot for data centers in the town of Marana, because of all the location issues that we've talked about in the water issue, is somewhere in agricultural land being converted from agricultural to another use. And agricultural use actually uses a lot more water than residential or commercial or industrial uses. And this industrial use is an average industrial use, not necessarily a data center use. But the reality is that converting from agriculture to a data center, while it will still use a lot of water, it is less than an agricultural use.
I'm gonna steal your microphone. Thanks, Jane. Chris Norman's with TEP. Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. You all hear me okay? Chris Norman, Vice President of Public Policy with Tucson Electric Power.
Good. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for joining us. So, like I said, this is the portion of the electrical elements of the code that says that, they have to provide us with a letter that clearly represents that the intended power is there and that the provider is aware and that they will be able to supply the needs of that development. So, Chris, tell us if a data center is coming to TEP, what process do you guys go through as far as looking at whether or not you're going to be able to provide power to that type of user?
Sure, that's a great question. And as Ben has alluded to, these tend to be very large power users. So we don't see a lot of these users with this type of load. Load refers to the amount of electricity that the consumer uses on site. And so this is new territory for us as well, just like the town has gone through a very extensive process. We also have a resource planning process that we do. You've heard a lot about plans and strategic plans. We do the same thing at the power company. We look out 15 years and try to forecast what we need to bring on to serve customers in our service territory. This is somewhat unprecedented growth, and so we're learning as we go as well. And so you may have heard a little bit about one project that's located south about Houghton Road and I-10. That one's a little bit unique in that we had some excess capacity, some excess power that we could provide to that customer and bring them on within their time frame. The next one is going to be much more unique, wherever that's located, if it's in Marana or elsewhere. So it will require an extensive facility studies, which will measure is the existing infrastructure, if we have the power available, could we serve that customer? So it will give us that answer. That answer is very important. And then the next one, the source of the power. Again, these are very large customers, so we will work closely with the customer on their timelines and then provide them, again, growth pays for itself. And so if this resource is developed specifically for this customer, they would be paying for those costs. But it is a very extensive planning process that we go through.
So Chris, along those lines, one of the questions we hear or that's come up most recently is the question of, will the residential customers see a rate increase or a bill increase if a data center were to come in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the good thing about, in the power business anyway, is that if you can add more customers to a system, typically then you can spread out those fixed costs and help make rates affordable for all customers. So if we have existing infrastructure, it's not fully utilized 24/7. So you think about how, we all use power. We use a lot in the morning when we're getting ready for work or getting up. Not a whole lot during the day. And then when we get home in the summer, when it gets much hotter, we use more power. But then at night, our usage goes down. The beauty about large power users, they tend to use it flat out at a very high rate all day long. That's really good for our system, where we can, when our system isn't utilized, we can spread those fixed costs over more sales of kilowatt hours to those customers, and then it helps the rest of us in terms of making our rates more affordable.
Great, thank you, Chris, we really appreciate it. Chris will be around too if there's questions. Vanna, you want to come up and do questions? And I should say, like we've said a number of times here, if you want to review a copy of the data center ordinance, the full one, we'd be happy to provide that. Reach out to us, Jane or I, and I think, we can even put it in a key location on the website if you just want to go there and grab it rather than search through the whole town code. But there's a lot more detail to what we covered here.
All right, the first question here, I don't know that we'll be able to answer because we don't have a representative from TRICO here tonight. And this is TRICO's, what is TRICO's plan to provide additional power for its data centers? I apologize, we'll have to get with whoever asked this question. We'll get with TRICO and get a response from them and send that to you. Yes, their names on it. How much noise is what it says? I imagine that's asking how much noise do data centers produce?
Well, what I found in our research was it really varied and depended, to be perfectly honest. And there were some that were creating decibel levels that were over 55 decibels, which was near residential, which seemed to be like a number that was causing issues for people. So we have in our ordinance decibel levels that they can't exceed in daytime and nighttime, and depending on what they are adjacent to, whether it's residential or commercial, or if it's another industrial use, that's not a concern. But particularly with residential, we wanted to keep that at a lower amount. So it depends how they're operating, but as we talked about in our ordinance, we'll require that noise contour exhibit and to show what current noise is and what the projected noise is at full build out, and to make sure that they have to stay under those decibel limits that we've set. And so and if they don't, they won't be able to operate. That's the bottom line. They won't get If they do it before they open, they're not gonna be able to open, and then we'll require them to provide us with updates, as they operate over the years to make sure that they're staying within those decibel levels.
All right, and this one, I think this has been covered, but Marana water availability to support data centers.
Yeah, so I think we've covered it, but Marana Water will only be providing potable water for the business needs, the commercial office needs, not the industrial needs of a data center. They'll have to get that from somebody else.
All right, and then why not require solar and battery storage?
Okay, good question. So from a resource planning perspective, we look for the lowest cost, most affordable resource to provide customers. Sorry. But however, if a customer has a specific resource need that they would like to use, if they have clean energy targets, then we would do that for them. But just to provide a little perspective, if for a, let's say, sorry to get too technical here, but for a 500 megawatt customer, that's a fairly large customer. If we were to build incremental natural gas fired generation, that could cost up to $1.5 billion. If we were to build the equivalent amount of batteries and solar energy, that would be $4.5 billion. So our choice would be to do the safest, reliable, affordable path for that customer. However, if that customer wants to pay that incremental cost, they can do that.
We got a similar question last meeting about why not require solar as part of a data center. First of all, the town does not require solar for any of our developments. It's an optional thing that's left out there. TEP and TRICO run their programs to provide incentives or benefits for those. But the example I shared with the lady that had asked the question was, and I'm not an electrical engineer or anywhere near it, almost became an architect with Jane, but if a data center were to occupy 100 acres and then came in and said, well, we're going to power it through solar and had to put up 1,000 acres of solar panels next to it, think of how that would appear. So I don't believe that there is enough power in a solar field that it would be of an acceptable size to be able to power a data center of any reasonable magnitude.
All right, and last question here. Does the Marana ordinance address issues of how to correct problems if the data center breaks the ordinance with regard to noise, electricity, water, etc.? I'm not sure how they might violate the water and electricity, but
Yeah.
if they violate a portion of the
So I mean, from the water perspective, one, our water department is the one that's making the connection, installing the meters and all of that. So you're not going to be able to hook it up to your cooling system because our team is the one that's going to be connecting it. If for some reason you go and you monkey with the meter and you divert it and all that, those numbers are going to climb rapidly. Our team's going to be all over it and quickly address it. Jane briefly touched on this from the noise part of this. As part of the noise attenuation requirements, they have to, before they can even occupy the building, they have to fire up the system and provide us with a noise reading that shows that they're in compliance with the ordinance. And then every year after that, they also have to provide us with an updated noise study, or anytime they switch out equipment, they have to provide us with an updated noise study. If they're found to be in violation of that, once they're up and running, say they switch out equipment and now it's not meeting the requirements, we would take it through like we do any other zoning violation. We would go through that process by notifying them, letting them know that they need to correct it, give them the opportunity to correct it. If they just choose to ignore us and say, go away, we're doing our thing, that's why we have attorneys, and Jane will take them down the appropriate legal path.
And the police.
And that would apply for, not just for the noise issues, but for any of the issues. So because it's a rezoning, these are all going to be conditions of their rezoning, and if they don't comply with them, it's a zoning violation, and we have code enforcement officers and police and the attorney's office that can enforce those zoning violations.
All right, well, somebody made a liar out of me because there was one more question that just came in. This is a really great question. Would a data center be allowed to drill their own water wells?
Maybe that's a
Mike,
Mike, go!
yeah, it's a good thing he didn't let him go home.
I know.
That is a great question. Can a data center drill their own water well? If a data center is built on an agricultural parcel that has associated water rights with it, and those water rights transfer ownership from the current owner to the data center operator, that there is a possibility that a data center could drill their own well and provide their own water. Not a preferable option. And in that case, Marana Water is very interested in what happens to that water after that process is completed. Worst case scenario, what we don't want to see is that water go into an evaporation pond and just evaporate and be gone. We want to make the most beneficial use out of that water. Be it, can we send it through another treatment process and recharge it in one of our underground storage facilities or groundwater shavings facilities to make the most beneficial use of that water. So yes, if there is water rights associated with those lots and those water rights transfer ownership, that is a possibility. But at that point, Marana Water will be very interested in what happens to that water after they're done with it.
Excellent answer, Mike. I'm so glad I didn't let you go home. All right, and just so you know, everything that we're hearing now at this point is the data centers at least in Southwest America, are not going to be using water cooled. They're going to be using air cooled. So they won't be a high water user. That's what we're hearing at this point. But I think, Marana is in a little bit of a different position because we don't have to allow them to use our water, and they can use irrigation water. And as Mike said earlier, a data center actually uses less water than the water that is used to water the crops. So if it's using irrigation water, right, and we pull that water that they use to cool when they're done using it, and we send that and treat it, if they treat it for us actually, they treat it for us so that we can pull that water out and send it to our recharge basins, we can actually potentially benefit from water. But again, what we're hearing more and more is that they're not going to water cool in this area. So that concludes. I mean, we talked about growth. I hope that was helpful. We talked about the RTA. I hope that was informative. We talked about the data centers here. The one thing I want to just kind of wrap up here with on the data centers is, as the mayor said at the beginning, we haven't had an application from anybody yet. But we do anticipate, because, at least one has been talking, very regularly with the town. And so we do anticipate that we're going to get an application from a data center. And I think one of the people wrote on one of the things, no data centers. And I totally get that. I'll be honest with you. I was in the same camp when we first, we literally, I think, largely put the data center ordinance in place to be able to say no to data centers. And I think that was kind of the point. But as we've gone along and kind of seen this process, we do believe that there is a potential for data centers in Marana where it makes sense, where it's not going to be near housing, where it's not going to utilize our water, where we can benefit from its critical infrastructure. Let's face it, everything that we're doing on our phones, everything that we're doing in our computers, everything you do with your pictures, your medical records, everything, right, is stored on these in these large computers. So they are very important critical infrastructure facilities. Does that mean we're going to have them in Marana? I don't know. But here's what I think is fantastic for the town of Marana, and why I'm just going to say I'm very proud of what the town has done in this area, because we got way out in front of this thing. We put an ordinance in place. And the council, the mayor and the council is 100% in the driver's seat when it comes to if we're gonna have a data center or not, if we do have one, where it's gonna go, if we do have one, what it's gonna look like. So all of those things, when the issues that people have continuously complained about across the country when it comes to data centers, we've positioned ourselves extremely well to be able to address all of those and allow for one if we want to, or not allow for one if we don't want to. So, kudos to Jane, to Jason, to the rest of the team that have worked very hard, and the council that, really pushed this in the very beginning when we started hearing horror stories in the Phoenix Valley area, because we didn't want to find ourselves in a position where we had data centers everywhere. And that will not happen, that I can promise you. But I think at the end of the day, what it's going to boil down to is simply this. At the end of the day, if a data center does not make sense for the town of Marana, we're not going to have a data center in the town of Marana. At the end of the day, if it does make sense for the town of Marana, we can put it in a place where it doesn't impact residents, and it provides the services that data centers provide, and it helps the town, right? Helps our residents. Some people say, well, all you care about is the money. Okay, well, understand that whenever we get money from any business, it's not our money. It's not my money. It doesn't go into my pocket. It doesn't go into Jason or Jane's pocket, right? It goes into the general fund, and we use that money to fund things like roads and parks and pathways and recreation and all of those things. So if it makes sense, the town's going to do it. If it doesn't make sense, we're not going to do it. So I hope that's helpful. I really appreciate you guys. Been an awesome audience. Tons of questions from you guys, and we appreciate that. Again, for those of you who didn't get your questions answered, I do apologize, but we will respond to those via email. Andrea is fabulous with that. And thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening.